Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, January the 3rd, 2025. Today there is an opposition aspect between Mars and Pluto, and in this video I want to consider what impact this opposition might have in terms of our own lives and in terms of the world in general. But before I look at this Mars-Pluto opposition specifically in detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching of today, which is January the 3rd, 2025, and it's a Friday. Before I do that, I just want to ask that if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe, because I think it does make a big difference to the channel. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today. So, as usual, here is the chart for noon on Friday, January the 3rd, set for New York, and the moon is at 0 degrees 57 Pisces. So it's a day of two halves, arguably. The moon moving from Aquarius into Pisces, and the moon actually moves into Pisces at 21 minutes past 3 in the afternoon London time. So if you're in the Americas, then this morning the moon moves into Pisces. If you're, for example, so in New York, that would be at 21 minutes past 10 in the morning. In California, that would be 21 minutes past 7 in the morning. So from the Americas perspective, I would have said it's a kind of a moon in Pisces day. If you're in Europe or Africa, it's kind of half and half most of the day. Well, not really half and half. Sort of most of the day actually has the moon in Aquarius. And then the moon moves into Pisces over the afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, really, it's a moon in Aquarius day. So that's kind of a bit annoying from my perspective, because I like to look at the day, at least from a perspective of the 12 signs, as the moon being either in one sign or the other. But here, one can't really say that the moon is in Pisces today, because it really does depend on your time zone. So aside from the moon going into Pisces, there are other things going on. We have got, for example, Venus moving into Pisces. So Pisces is suddenly getting a lot of focus. Venus moves into Pisces at, I think I've got it at 3:24 a.m. London time. So that's pretty early in the morning, and so all of us are going to experience that sign change. So in fact, if you're in the Americas, Venus would have moved into Pisces last night. So with the moon moving into Pisces, Venus moving into Pisces, that is a big change. And there is a sudden Piscean emphasis. And I mean, it's not really the case that the Pisces season has started, because the Pisces season doesn't start in earnest until the sun moves into Pisces, you could say, and that's not until the end of February. But there is a big Pisces emphasis now. It's not just that we've got the moon and Venus moving into Pisces. We've also got Saturn in Pisces, and we've also got Neptune there as well. So that is a big change, because we have had the moon and Venus in Aquarius, so there was an Aquarian feel to what was going on. Aquarius being an air sign, being rational, being logical, and suddenly it's moved into Pisces. And the emphasis is going to be far more on emotion and how we express our emotions, and also our own sensitivity, because the moon and Venus is in Pisces. It can be sensitive. Now, Venus moving into Pisces, you could say that is a good thing, because Venus is exalted in Pisces. Venus, does well in the signs it rules, which is Taurus and Libra. But the exaltation sign is also pretty good. And so with Venus moving into Pisces, that might in general be good for Venusian things connected with beauty and what things look like and relationships. Though we shouldn't forget that Venus, as it moves through Pisces, is going to start making a conjunction to Saturn. I mean, some would argue that Venus kind of makes a conjunction to Saturn the moment it moves into Pisces, simply because Saturn is in Pisces. And so you can have a conjunction simply by two planets occupying the same sign. But I wouldn't have thought we're going to be feeling that Venus-Saturn conjunction straight away. Maybe it'll be another week before it really starts to become an issue. And possibly the main aspect of the day, something which I've been talking a lot about recently, is the opposition aspect between Mars and Pluto. And it has been building up. In fact, this opposition has been around for really a couple of months, because when Mars moved into Leo around the time of the election, it straight away made an opposition to Pluto. In fact, the election took place, I'm talking about the US presidential election on, was it November the 5th? That election took place at the time of a Mars-Pluto opposition. And because Mars goes retrograde, this opposition has kind of dominated things over the last couple of months. And so now it's exact, and I suppose there are concepts of power and people trying to express their power. And with this Mars-Pluto opposition, over the last day or two, we've had a lot of shootings. We've had a shooting in New Orleans, which I think 15 people were killed. I'm going to talk about that again, and I'm going to talk about the perpetrator. And also there was a shooting in Montenegro, in the Balkans. I don't know quite what that was about, but someone got upset and started shooting in a bar, and I think 10 people were killed. I think there's been a shooting in New York, not to mention the exploding Tesla in Las Vegas. So the Mars-Pluto opposition is really making itself felt, I think, at the moment. And with this Mars-Pluto opposition, for our part, we can do our best to make sure it doesn't get out of control. We don't want to get involved in power struggles, and perhaps we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. Perhaps that's a danger. If we do take ourselves too seriously, then we might feel that we have no option but to make sort of dramatic moves. But are we that important? Is it so important to be able to, so important that we really feel we must assert ourselves? So there's a few of the things going on today. The moon in late Aquarius does make a square to Uranus. And so moon square Uranus can be a little bit unpredictable, and people being stubborn. But people might be stubborn because of that Mars opposition Pluto as well. So if you see people behaving strangely or in a dramatic way, it might be difficult to work out whether it's moon square Uranus or whether it's Mars opposition Pluto. So those are a few thoughts about what's happening today. It is quite a busy day, and so 0 degrees Pisces is where the moon is at noon in New York. From a perspective of Sydney, Australia, it's somewhat different. For some reason, I put Sunday rather than Sydney. That Sunday, I mean Sydney. Sorry about that. But so this chart covers Australia and New Zealand, and it just shows that the moon is in a different position. The moon is in Aquarius. Moon is in 21 Aquarius at noon today. If you're in Sydney, Australasia. So if you're in Sydney, Australia. So in Australasia, that moon in Pisces stuff that I've been talking about, that is a feature of tomorrow. Even with Venus Venus is at noon in Sydney is still in Aquarius, and so and in New Zealand certainly Venus won't move into Pisces until this afternoon. So if you're in Australasia, a lot of the stuff I was talking about in terms of Pisces is more about later in the day, or even into tomorrow. And as far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, here it is. Reset the coordinates to heliocentric. So there you can see what's happening. Obviously, there's no sun in this chart. We look at it from a perspective of the Earth. Earth is at 13 Cancer. I mean, the Earth will eventually move to a conjunction with Mars. You can start to see this happening, but that conjunction between Earth and Mars is going to take quite a long time to develop. I don't think that we're really going to be feeling it particularly at the moment, and I would have thought that's it. I don't see anything wildly exciting about that chart. Oh, except for the fact that Venus is conjunct Uranus. Exact Venus-Uranus conjunction. I mean, we had that conjunction yesterday, but it was just applying. Now it's exact. So Venus-Uranus conjunction could be about relationships, things happening, things perhaps becoming more interesting. And it can also be about art and what looks good and what we feel looks good. So we might sort of have ideas about aesthetics, which may be dramatic and may not be to everyone's taste. So that is a possible manifestation of Venus conjunct Uranus. But it just does indicate to me that we can't expect sort of everything to go to plan in terms of relationships, and that might mean excitement. We also have Mercury square Pluto. Mercury is pretty exactly square Pluto, so Mercury square Pluto is about us, I suppose, trying to assert our ideas, and it's another of these aspects that might be easy to mix up with Mars opposition Pluto, or maybe it just supports Mars opposition Pluto, because Mars opposition Pluto is an aspect that is very focused on power and power dynamics. In fact, of course, this is a Mars opposition Pluto geocentrically, and Mercury square Pluto heliocentrically may also be concerned about power and how we assert ourselves and making sure that we get our message across. And Mercury square Pluto can, in certain situations, be quite manipulative. So yes, so the two main aspects over the course of the day heliocentrically are the Venus conjunct Uranus and the Mercury square Pluto. So I'm now going to look at the 12 signs, and I'm going to do my forecast for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, January the 3rd, 2025. Aries. Aries, things are in a process of change. I think that, recently you have felt that you are becoming a little more sociable, perhaps enjoying other people's company with the moon in Aquarius, and of course yesterday we had Moon trine Jupiter. Hope you made the most of that. But now you may be having second thoughts. The moon is moving through late Aquarius, and it's moving into Pisces, and so if you have a lot to do with other people, there may be a certain sense of strain, perhaps a feeling that you don't really get on with everyone. I mean, you can't get on with everyone. That is pretty much impossible. And so you may be thinking that you need a little bit of distance. And, that's going to be especially the case if you're in the Americas, because the moon moves into Pisces late morning, and so maybe not even that late. Depends where you are. If it's late morning in East Coast, sort of fairly early morning West Coast, and as the moon moves into Pisces, Aries, you may feel that you want to withdraw. You've done whatever you have to do, and you're perhaps becoming sort of more sensitive than usual, and you may be aware of the impact that other people could have on you, and also the impact that you could have on them. And I suppose that connects with this opposition between Mars and Pluto, which I've been going on and on about over the last few days. And this Mars opposition Pluto is quite a heavy influence, and it does make you think about how much control you have. And so if you were surrounded by people, power issues may be quite obsessive for you. You might be thinking about them a lot. You might be thinking about how much impact you can have, how much impact that people are having on you, and that's not necessarily very comfortable. And so maybe you do want some distance. But there is a positive side to this Mars opposition Pluto. The Mars opposition Pluto does give you a great sense of what you can do. I mean, even though Mars is retrograde, and perhaps you feel that if you're not careful, you might miss an opportunity. And Mars is still in Leo. Mars does move back into Cancer pretty quickly, and while Mars is in Leo, you perhaps want to take advantage of it, and it's really doing something which is important to you. And the Mars isn't just in Leo, it's actually making a trine to the North Node, and the North Node is in Aries. So think, Aries, what is it all about? What are you actually supposed to be doing? What's really dear to your heart? And when I say dear to your heart, it's not about your ego. It's your task, something which you've been put on the planet for. At least you've been put on the planet to do something in particular in 2025. So, what is it? And I don't think it's anything trivial. It's perhaps something you need to start work on. You may, for one reason or another, have to stop work on it quite soon, but then you'll have to resume work later on, later in the year, perhaps when Mars goes, because Mars is going to go back into Cancer, and then it's going to go forward again. Well, it goes direct in February, and then it will go back. Then it will go return to Leo a bit later in the year. So do think about what you are supposed to be doing. And it is also connected with that node. And you don't forget, the North Node has been travelling through Aries for some time, for the last couple of years. And the North Node is about to leave Aries at some stage this month. And, as far as when that happens, this ephemeris only has the true node, the mean node. But if you look at the mean node, at the end of the month, but in fact you get it. In fact, it runs through until February actually. So, well, it's a close run thing. No, let's get that right. I think it's about January the 29th. So in about 4 weeks' time, less than 4 weeks' time, the North Node will be out of Aries, and so while the North Node is in Aries, it's very powerfully placed at the moment because it's actually on the Aries point. And so I would have thought, Aries, you really should have a strong sense of, something you need to be doing, something you should have been doing over the last couple of years. Maybe you got it together, maybe you didn't get it together, but it might even be a sort of a last chance. And so this might be how it feels with Mars trine the North Node, and it's just quite possible that other people may not be particularly helpful, especially with this Mars opposition Pluto. If you spend time worrying about other people and what people want and what people don't want, then you might get distracted, you might get annoyed, you might get angry, and you might sort of reach the conclusion that you are involved in some kind of a power struggle, that either you win or someone else wins, and it can't be a win-win situation. Someone's got to give in, someone's got to give way, and you don't want that person to be you. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, things could be a little bit tense because of this Mars opposition Pluto, but we also have Venus moving into Pisces, and so Venus moving into Pisces may say something about some of the people in your life, the people closest to you, and that Venus in Pisces might indicate that there is a change. As Venus moves out of Aquarius into Pisces, some people might be more emotional than usual, more sensitive as well. So, don't assume that people are going to be open and upfront, especially the people closest to you. They might be somewhat reserved, but not unemotional. I mean, having powerful feelings, but at the same time, not necessarily wanting to reveal these feelings. And so if you are in a relationship, then I think it's very important to be patient as Venus moves into Pisces, and to understand the other person's perspective, and also not feel that you need to know everything. You might have questions that you want to ask, but I think too many questions would probably be intrusive. So let the important people in your life develop in their own way, and really respect their sensitivity. Taurus, Venus is moving into Pisces, and this movement, I think, is likely to have an impact on you. Possibly quite a fortunate impact, because Venus does function very well in Pisces. After all, Venus is exalted in this sign. And so with Venus moving into Pisces, I think that you're going to be perhaps more sympathetic and more sensitive than usual. And at the same time, you're going to find it easier to look after yourself. And, why is that? It's not because you are being super assertive or anything like that. The reason you can look after yourself is because you're going to have greater awareness. Sometimes Taurians can be a little bit unsubtle, and they can be just quite focused on what they want to do and focused on their point of view, and they can just ignore what's happening in the world around them. And actually that can make them vulnerable because they don't know what's going on. But with Venus in Pisces, that does give you increased sensitivity, and it also makes you just more aware, and you're more aware of what people are thinking and feeling. You're more aware of the society around you. You pick up on things, and because you understand what's going on, you are in general just in a better position to be able to protect yourself, and also to be able to anticipate what's going to happen next. And so with Venus in Pisces, perhaps you're less likely to be surprised. And as far as how you come across as a person, I think you just come over as a nicer person. I mean, I'm not saying you're not a nice person, but you can come over as an even nicer person because Venus is in Pisces. And you yourself are going to just feel more relaxed. I think while Venus was in Aquarius, you were perhaps thinking about what you had to do, and Venus in Aquarius could also have had a certain focus on what you looked like, perhaps being quite self-conscious with Venus in Aquarius. But I think with now that Venus is in Pisces, I think you're going to lose some of your self-consciousness, and I think you're going to be more relaxed. So Venus moving into Pisces is something very much to be welcomed, I think. And then of course the moon is moving into Pisces as well. And okay, the moon moves into Pisces over the course of the day, and it depends where you are, but for example, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then for much of the day. In fact, all the day. It's not until tomorrow that the moon moves into Aquarius. But tomorrow, the moon is moving out of Aquarius into Pisces, and that is in general going to make you feel more relaxed, and you're not going to be in so much of a hurry. You're not going to feel that you got to do everything now this minute, and it will support Venus in terms of making you a nicer person. I think Venus moving into Pisces makes you a nice person. The moon making a conjunction to Venus in Pisces, makes you very sensitive, and sensitive in a nice way. You can really understand people and respond to them in a way that is sympathetic. But we can talk about Venus in Pisces quite a lot, but we don't want to forget the fact that Mars is opposition Pluto, and this opposition with Mars and Pluto does have an impact on you, and it may relate to other people, or it may relate to just how you are trying to get through life, get through the world, understand everything. And Mars opposition Pluto, it's quite a heavy aspect, and it does hit an important axis in your chart. So you've got Venus in Leo, which Leo is a fixed sign like Taurus. Got Pluto in Aquarius, another fixed sign. So this Mars-Pluto opposition is hitting the sort of work-home axis of your chart. And so you yourself might feel that there is a bit of a struggle. It's a struggle I don't think you want to be involved with. Remembering that Venus is going into Pisces. I think Venus in Pisces doesn't want to have past struggles, but you may be aware of struggles. And I think that while you yourself are going to be fairly sympathetic to other people and other people's needs, you might find that certain people in your life are very set in their ways, are very focused on what they want, and that is perhaps symbolized by Mars retrograde in Leo. Mars retrograde. People are very sure of what they want at a particular moment. I mean, people can change their minds. People can want one thing, they can want another thing, but what's consistent is the fact that they want their way, even though their desires are changing. And so it's a situation that could turn out to be quite stuck. I mean, it might be stuck in a sort of a domestic sense, in terms of close relationships, just someone being very persistent. And fortunately, you are quite sensitive, and if people are really focused on themselves, then I think you're going to know about it. Now, normally, perhaps as a Taurus, you might have sort of assumed a conflict, assumed that it was a situation where just someone had to back down. But I think as Venus moves into Pisces, this does give you a certain amount of flexibility, and it may be that certain people have to just be left perhaps to their own devices, or to be able to just resolve things in their own way. And at the same time as the Mars's opposition Pluto, we have heliocentrically Venus conjunct Uranus. Remember, it's a heliocentric aspect. It won't show on the main sort of Western geocentric chart, but heliocentrically Venus is conjunct Uranus, and that may say something about you. And yes, you can be quite flexible, and you can understand people's needs, and you can respond to people's needs. But also with Venus conjunct Uranus, you do actually have a certain quirky individuality. Maybe you're not pushing it too far, but it's just something you're picking up on, and you just feel that something has changed, and perhaps something has changed in you, and you perhaps do want to do something differently. And I think that you can do something differently, but in such a way that doesn't necessarily cause too much upset. You can be an individual, and you can be an individual without having to upset people. So ask yourself how you want to be an individual, and that way you can perhaps tune into what's happening in the cosmos, because that's really what the heliocentric chart is about. It's something quite impersonal, these sort of impersonal energies in the heliocentric chart. And that Venus conjunct Uranus, it may be an option. It may not be a compulsory aspect, an aspect that you necessarily have to take on board, but you can take on board this aspect if you really want. And yes, I think you can be an individual. So today it's a kind of a mixed picture. I think you yourself, with Venus moving into Pisces, are more relaxed, and you're becoming more relaxed, and you're becoming a nicer person. But with Venus conjunct Uranus heliocentrically, being a nice person doesn't mean someone who just does what everyone wants. It's a nice person who can be very focused on who they are and why they are different. And also, you can have some great ideas with Venus conjunct Uranus heliocentrically. But that's one side of things. The other side of things is this Mars opposition Pluto. And someone seems to be stubborn. Someone is very set in their ways. And you need to negotiate this person. You shouldn't regard it as a conflict. I mean, it may be that the other person does regard it as a conflict, but you shouldn't regard it as a conflict. And in certain situations, it may just be best to just leave people to their own devices. I mean, or just leave one person to their own devices, because I think there are lots of people out there. You can enjoy their company, but you just maybe find that one or two people are just being too difficult, and maybe you need to just let them calm down. I mean, this Mars-Pluto opposition is not going to last forever. Gemini, we are starting to get quite a big emphasis on the sign Pisces. So we do have Venus moving into Pisces, and the moon will be moving into Pisces. When the moon moves into Pisces kind of depends on your time zone. It might be today, it might be tomorrow. But at some stage we do have a Moon-Venus conjunction in Pisces. And, Venus will be in Pisces for some time. And with this Pisces emphasis, I think that you're going to be thinking about what kind of image you're presenting. Because Pisces, as a sign from a Gemini perspective, it's quite a high profile sign in your chart. And indeed, it's probably the most high profile sign. And you're aware of your image, and perhaps you're thinking about the kind of image you need to present if you want to be successful, for example. I mean, I think it's perhaps unnecessary to be too image conscious, but I think you could be really thinking about how you appear. And Venus in Pisces for you, it is that aspect, or sorry, it is that configuration or that sign placement, which is about looking in the mirror. I mean, I don't know how often you look in the mirror. I don't look in the mirror very often, but in general, you may be more focused than usual on how you appear with Venus moving into Pisces. And you perhaps might be thinking about how you might want to change your image. I mean, I'm Sun in Gemini. I'm not too bothered, I don't think, by my image. But on the other hand, this YouTube channel, I know people say it's fine, but it's not fine. I think that there are definitely things I can do with this channel, and I mean, not the superficial stuff is going to start to bother me. I mean, that's what I'm predicting for myself, for example. So, as Venus goes into Gemini on this channel, you're looking at my face, you're looking at the lighting, you're looking at what I'm wearing, and so this is something that's going to start to worry me. And with Venus moving into Pisces, and maybe this is something I'm going to want to address. And I have these, I'm always thinking I've got to change the lighting, I've got to change the appearance of this channel. I mean, some people say it doesn't matter, most people say it doesn't matter, but I think maybe they're just being kind. And the background, I mean, I'm sorry to unload this stuff about my channel and my insecurities about this channel, but these insecurities are likely to get worse because Venus is moving into Pisces. But maybe worse is the wrong word to use. I think with Venus in Pisces for Geminis, it's a good thing. I mean, Venus is exalted in Pisces. So Gemini, if you want to change your appearance, then you can. And I think Gemini, you're going to have a good understanding of what kind of look is right. And I mean, again, we think that looks don't matter, but when I'm making this recording, Venus is in Aquarius. By the time you see this recording, you watch this recording, Venus will be in Pisces, and so things will change. And I think that with Venus in Pisces, you're just going to be more sensitive to what people like, what people don't like, and aesthetics are going to be important. But I don't want you to feel too self-conscious. I mean, you don't want to be self-conscious just for the sake of it. That's not going to help. And also with Venus moving through Pisces, I think that you can be more successful, and so perhaps you should take advantage of Venus moving through Pisces. I mean, Venus doesn't move through Pisces forever. Venus moves out of Pisces and into Aries on where is it? Yeah, Venus moves into Aries on February the 4th. So over the next month, while Venus is in Pisces, I think you should really take advantage of it and make sure that you do your best. And yeah, I'm afraid appearances might matter. The way you present yourself, the way you communicate. I mean, I suppose it's not just the words that matter; it's the way the words are presented, because presentation is important. But also, we have the Moon moving through Pisces, moving into Pisces. Okay, it might not move into Pisces until tomorrow. It depends on your time zone. But with the Moon and Venus in Pisces, as the week comes to an end, as you move into the weekend, then I think the whole way in which you present yourself, is going to be important, or rather, you're going to regard it as being important. And from a perspective of your status and your ambitions, there are things you can do to move forward with it all, and it does, I'm afraid, have a lot to do with presentation. Now, you can't expect everything to happen at once. I think that over the course of the day, Gemini, you may feel that there are a few delays, and those delays might be because some people are rather stuck in the past. They're thinking, well, it's still the new year. It's a Friday. It's the end of a holiday week, even though it's not a holiday anymore. But people are a little bit stuck in the seasonal past. They still think it's Christmas. They still think it's New Year. So don't have too many expectations of other people. And if something is important to you, Gemini, then make sure you do it yourself. And also, it's perhaps about laying the groundwork, laying the social groundwork. You can present yourself. You might not feel that people are necessarily responding to you, but they are noticing. And so maybe what you're doing today and into the weekend may not get any immediate results, but I think you'll be creating the foundations for a potentially very successful month ahead. Cancer. The moon is moving from Aquarius to Pisces, and it kind of depends. That is always the problem of doing Cancerian horoscopes. Cancer, in some ways, of all the 12 signs, when I try to work out what's going on for each of the 12 signs, arguably Cancer is the most difficult. And the reason Cancer is most difficult, it's not that Cancer is a problem sign. It's the fact that Cancer's ruling planet, because if you're doing 12 sign horoscopes, the ruling planet really does matter. And with Cancer, the ruling planet is the moon, and the moon just moves so fast. And particularly when I'm doing horoscopes, 12 sign horoscopes for everyone around the world, different people in different places are going to have different experiences. So that can be a little bit of a problem in terms of dealing with Cancerians. Sorry, I know you shouldn't be dealt with. I didn't mean to use that word. But the moon is in the process of making a change, of making a sign change. It is moving from Aquarius to Pisces, and so over the course of the next 24 hours, whether it's January the 3rd or January the 4th, I think that you're probably going to perhaps become more relaxed and just more easygoing. I mean, I think with the moon in Aquarius, it has been a little bit difficult. Moon in Aquarius. I mean, Aquarius is a sign that doesn't have much to do with Cancer. I mean, Aquarius is an air sign. Cancer is a water sign. Cancer is cardinal. Aquarius is fixed. So, with moon in Aquarius, there were some, I think, serious things to think about, and you may have felt you wanted to keep things to yourself and perhaps work things through on your own. But with the moon moving into Pisces, I think that you can, to an extent, lighten up. I mean, even with the moon in late Aquarius, you're starting to feel that something is coming to an end, and you're perhaps having some realizations. I mean, the moon in late Aquarius makes a square to Uranus, so moon square Uranus, that is about you, and you might sort of see something for the first time, and you might feel that that actually has had quite an important impact on you when you realize something and you realize the truth about something. Moon square Uranus can also make you quite stubborn. So with the moon in late Aquarius, you're not in the mood really for doing things other people's way, for trying too hard to look at things from another person's point of view. You're very focused on what makes you special, what makes you independent, and it's not a time for just doing things that you don't want to do. And then the moon moves into Pisces, and with the moon moving into Pisces, there is a change. I mean, Pisces is a water sign. You start to become sort of more relaxed. So over the course of the day and into tomorrow, you're starting to sort of see things from a different view. You're not so focused on one thing. You don't feel that you have to defend your territory so much, and you're perhaps more aware that there are opportunities out there all around you. And Venus is also moving into Pisces. So Venus moves into Pisces sort of London time pretty early in the morning, 3:24. So that's going to, in fact, that means that if you're in the Americas, the Venus is already in Pisces. It moved into Pisces last night. And so even in Australia or New Zealand, Venus will be in Pisces, by this afternoon. So that Venus moving into Pisces for you, Cancer, I think that is something very much to welcome. And Venus is in Pisces until the beginning of next month, and so Venus in Pisces is about, I think, you in general being more open-minded and realizing perhaps that you haven't got all the answers, and perhaps taking the view that you can get a wider and broader view of the world, perhaps through social interaction. And you also there might be a sense in which the way you present yourself might change. And with all of these planets in Aquarius, because we have had a lot of planets in Aquarius, but now things are starting to leave Aquarius for the moment. You might have felt that you needed to present yourself in one particular way, which was very much a sense of who you are, who you feel you are. But now with Moon in Pisces and Venus moving into Pisces, you're perhaps being more open-minded about presentation, and you might want to reflect something sort of more perhaps otherworldly and exotic, and also be open to new ways of being, new ways of looking at the world, and new ways of trying to evaluate the world. So I think that you are more open-minded, and I think you're going to find it easier to deal with people who perhaps in the recent past you had disagreed with. So, I think that this Venus in Pisces, this movement through Venus in Pisces between now and the beginning of February, I think is going to open your mind in many respects. And a good way of opening your mind is to meet people from different backgrounds, from sort of different perspectives, and from a creative and artistic perspective, it's just important to try your hardest to be open-minded, because I think you can be open-minded, and I think you want to be open-minded. And this might reflect your attitudes to things like decoration and color, and what things look like. And I think overall you're going to be more interesting, and the reason you're going to be more interesting is because you're going to take a greater interest. That's the important point. Being interesting is not just something. Oh, I'm going to be more interesting. I'm going to present interesting things. By taking an interest in what other people are doing and what other people are saying and the ideas they've got, that actually feeds back on you, and it makes you more interesting. And so kind of everyone is a winner there. So overall, Cancer, I do think that things are improving, and I think that the Moon and Venus moving into Pisces is very much something that is going to be good for you. And I think right now increased variety is really what you need. Leo, you may feel at the moment that things are starting to get a little more complicated, and you're beginning to realize that things have implications, and it may be that there was something that just seemed simple and you were working with it and it seemed okay, and that might relate to other people as well. People were fairly straightforward. You felt you understood them. But now, with planets moving into Pisces, you're starting to see a different side to things. I mean, Venus is moving into Pisces. The moon may go into Pisces today. It might go into Pisces tomorrow, depending on your time zone. But with this increased Pisces emphasis, you're starting to see the complications coming up, and these are perhaps emotional complications. I mean, it's not necessarily that things are difficult, it's just that you're becoming aware that things weren't as simple as you had thought, and maybe people are not as simple as you'd thought, simple as in uncomplicated. And so there is a sense here, Leo, that you have to start seeing people in a way that is maybe quite multidimensional, and you can't just sort of dump some script onto them. They have their own ways of looking at things, and it may just become too complicated. And it's not just other people, it's just generally life, I suppose. Things you thought were going to be easy are not as easy as you thought. And the emotional dimension keeps cropping up, and you might feel that this is difficult, and perhaps that you want to withdraw. And I suppose the advantage of withdrawing is that you reduce the chance of being overwhelmed. And if you become overwhelmed by emotional inputs, there's some danger, Leo, that you might do something that you hadn't planned on doing and that may turn out to be unfortunate. And what kind of thing are we talking about? It could be that you get attracted to something. You try to work everything out, and one thing feels as if it makes sense. I mean, it doesn't fully make sense, but you think you get it, and you want to pursue it, and you pursue it without really knowing what you're doing, and that could be a major problem. So if you make a decision today that you want to do something, you just feel it would be a good thing to do. Maybe you feel it's the right thing to do. If you reach that stage, then ask yourself whether you actually know what you're doing, and ask yourself, what is the logical basis for your actions? And I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that there is no logical basis. That for some reason you've decided to do something which is potentially dangerous, or at least harmful. I'm not saying it's going to be physically dangerous, but it just might be about just reaching the wrong conclusions. So do be very careful about that. Also, Leo, we have now an exact opposition between Mars and Pluto. And so, Mars is right at the beginning of your sign. It's at noon New York time, it's at 1 degree 0 minutes Leo, going retrograde. Mars is right at the beginning of your sign, and it is opposition Pluto. And this could have an impact on other people and on relationships. I mean, Mars in Leo is about being assertive. I mean, Mars has been in Leo since the beginning of November, I think. Mars is about to leave Leo. It's soon enough it will go into Cancer. But with Mars moving through Leo, you have been quite focused on yourself, and you have at times been quite proud. But now it's reaching a somewhat difficult stage where you may feel as if you're trying to hold on to something, but something seems to be trying to challenge you or even take it away from you. Mars opposition Pluto. And I think it's important that you really try to work out what's going on. Are you dealing with a real situation where you are genuinely being disadvantaged by an outside force, which would be represented by Pluto? Or are you dealing with perhaps some kind of internal psychodrama that you feel that you're being threatened or weakened, but you're not absolutely sure what is threatening or weakening you? It's some vague force, again represented by Pluto. And so the question is, can you be realistic? And I do think that today it could be quite difficult for you to be realistic, and you might reach the wrong conclusions. So perhaps, Leo, you just have to sort of understand that nothing is clear, that it's not a time for starting anything, particularly starting anything which could have dramatic consequences. I mean, you can start something trivial, but if you're starting something important, well, I just don't think you know the facts. I don't think you fully know what you're getting yourself into. So it may be, it's Friday now. If you've got plans, if you want to initiate something, maybe you should wait until next week. Maybe next week things will be clearer. Maybe you should just wait until Mars moves into Cancer. Maybe when Mars moves into Cancer, there will be less pressure on you. I mean, it might not sound so great. It's nice having Mars in Leo, but when does Mars go into Cancer? Mars goes into Cancer on Monday. So maybe you should wait until Monday and see how you feel, and then you might be in a better position to to work out what you want to do. Virgo, you do have to consider the world around you. I mean, you would certainly like to be independent and to do things your way, and not to have to, take into account, outside distractions. But unfortunately, you're not alone on this planet, and over the next few days there are people to consider, because the moon is moving out of Aquarius into Pisces. So moon moving into Pisces, you may feel that other people do have an influence. You can pick up on it as well. I think that from an emotional perspective, you're starting to feel other people. You can feel what they're thinking, and you can feel their concerns, and they can't be ignored. And I suppose in a positive sense, you can come over as being someone very sympathetic. I mean, the moon is moving towards a conjunction of Venus. I mean, there is this Moon-Venus conjunction, and it is in Pisces, it is in your opposite sign. And so today or tomorrow, this Moon-Venus conjunction is going to be making its influence felt. And it does seem that your ability to sympathize with other people is going to be very useful. It's a capacity to sympathize. Does that mean that you will take advantage of this capacity? Not necessarily, because we do have at the moment, in a sort of a heliocentric perspective. Let me just show you the heliocentric chart, just a reminder, just to show you what I mean. From a heliocentric perspective, we do have Mercury square Mars. You see, there's Mercury, and sorry, not Mercury square Mars. I mean Mercury square Pluto, Mercury square Pluto. So we have got Mercury square Pluto at the same time as Mars is opposition Pluto. So, with Mercury square Pluto, heliocentrically, you you might start to see things in a different way. And yes, you can be sympathetic in terms of what you say, but you can also, perhaps with that heliocentric square between Mercury and Pluto, you may be rather too focused on power and making your influence felt. I mean, how much influence you have, Virgo, could actually be very important to you. And if you try too hard to push your point of view, you might alienate yourself. You just have to try a little bit. I mean, Mercury square Pluto, you can be successful. You can get people to see things from your perspective, and you can be gently manipulative. But if you try too hard, you might run into trouble. And again, we've got this aspect Mars opposition Pluto as well today. And Mars opposition Pluto could be about power struggles. And so how far do you want to take it? I mean, you can use your natural sympathy to not just make people feel better, but to an extent you can help them come round to your way of thinking. It can happen, but just don't push it, and don't be in too much of a hurry. Things may take their time, and some people are very slow. You know, they seem to be rooted in the past. They're thinking about something else. Perhaps as far as they're concerned, it's last year, and they're not really ready for 2025. I mean, I think you're absolutely ready for 2025, but not everyone is as quick as you are. And so I think, Virgo, it's just important that you're patient, and you also recognize that you can't do everything on your own, that you may have to wait for other people to catch up with you. And if you can just understand people's weaknesses and idiosyncrasies, I think that you'd be making things so much better for yourself. Libra, Venus is moving into Pisces, and that's something rather mixed. I mean, in one sense it's a good thing, but in another sense it may kind of slow things down. So you have had Venus moving through Aquarius, and it's the last few weeks, maybe last month almost, Venus moving through Aquarius. And you know, Venus moving through Aquarius, Libra, you know, it's great. I mean, it's a time when you can really be yourself. It was a time when you could be yourself, when you could tune into, you know, what you're good at, and at the same time really enjoy yourself. And I hope you made the most of Venus moving into Aquarius, moving through Aquarius. But you know, Venus in Aquarius, I mean, it's not a bad sign for Venus to be in, but I mean, it's not a particularly good sign, all things being equal. I mean, I think it's good for you because you're an Aquarius. I think if you're a different sign, I mean, if you were, I don't know, if you were Cancer, for example, maybe Venus in Aquarius wouldn't be quite so easy. But from a Libran perspective, it was good. But Venus moving into Pisces, well, that is a change, and Venus is your ruler. So Venus moving into Pisces means that Venus is moving into a sign where it is exalted. So you could say Libra, that in some way you are becoming exalted. You are in a stronger position. You know, Venus has dignity in Pisces, a kind of dignity it doesn't have in Aquarius. So you are becoming more dignified, but Pisces and Libra are very different signs. Pisces is a water sign. It's a mutable water sign. You are a fixed air sign. Sorry, a cardinal air sign. So with Venus moving into Pisces, you do have to change your approach if you want to make the most of this placement. And with Venus moving through Pisces, it's a time to be perhaps more disciplined and to be aware of what needs to be done. But that doesn't mean you have to be aware of what needs to be done in a sort of very methodical, logical sense. It's not about, writing a list or anything like that, saying I've got to do this, this, and this, and then I'll be happy. It's not about that, because Venus is in Pisces. Venus in Pisces is about just understanding at an emotional level what you need to do in order to get what you want. And it may be that, over the last month, particularly if you've been very creative and you've done things that you're really proud of, with Venus moving into Pisces, you perhaps need to ground what you were doing into some kind of emotional reality. It's got to become it's got to become linked into you in a sort of an emotional sense. And I suppose it's about how we learn things. Maybe with Venus moving through Aquarius, it's more about the sort of a mental learning and mentally acclimatizing to something. Venus moving into Pisces, it's more about emotional. It's more about something emotional. So it's like things have to get deeper. And I mean, in terms of relationships, for example, Venus is not just the ruler of Libra. It is a natural planet of relationships. So, in terms of relationships, if you've got to know someone with Venus moving through Aquarius, you've got to know them on an intellectual level, on a mental level. Venus moving through Pisces, you have to get to know them on an emotional level, and that's kind of more complicated, and it takes more time. Venus in Pisces, and of course we've got the moon moving into Pisces as well, can also be about your health and well-being. And Venus is exalted in Pisces, so it does seem to me that over the next month you can actually do things to make yourself feel better and feel more comfortable. So if you feel that you've perhaps been neglecting your health, or you've been overdoing it, or you've been caught up in bad habits, then with Venus moving through Pisces, I think that you can, very much relax and understand what needs to be done. And when you're looking at a Libra chart, Pisces is a sign actually that is ruled by the feet. Now, I don't know much about reflexology and all that kind of stuff. That's not really my thing. But I suppose the feet could be quite important, and looking after your feet. I don't know, foot baths, all that kind of stuff. Don't ask me about that. But it may not just help your feet. It may help your whole body. Your feet, just look after your feet, and there might be a connection with shoes, and considering what kind of shoes you're wearing. Maybe you haven't paid attention to your footwear, and now is the time to really consider it with Venus moving through Pisces. I suppose this could be true for everyone, but I think particularly for Libra. So that might be something you want to do over the next month. Scorpio, the opposition aspect between Mars and Pluto has arrived. It's been arriving for some time. I've been talking about it over the last week or so, and it's now exact. And this Mars-Pluto opposition is powerful, and it is kind of very scorpionic. I mean, Mars opposition Pluto. I mean, I know that, well, at least in my opinion, Pluto doesn't really have anything to do with Scorpio. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm a traditionalist as far as I'm concerned. Mars rules Scorpio, not Pluto, but there is something scorpionic kind of about Pluto. I mean, I'm prepared to concede that Pluto has an association with Scorpio, and so this Mars-Pluto opposition can potentially make you fairly intense, and today you may be really focused on how much power you have, how much control you have. I mean, it's been brewing, but I think now it is really, really quite strong. And so don't exaggerate, and don't take things too seriously. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a bit serious, but don't be too serious with this Mars opposition Pluto. You can be in control without having to fight about it, and you shouldn't worry too much about imagined threats to your power. I mean, I think that if there are any threats to your power, they possibly come from within. It may be about your own doubts, or you feeling that you've got several responsibilities. So, you're trying to assert yourself in one place, but you're worrying about something else. Perhaps it's to do with your family or your home. I mean, after all, Pluto is in Aquarius, and that's Aquarius in a Scorpio chart is quite a home-orientated sign. So, that might be how the Mars-Pluto opposition is working. Now, there is a positive side, of course, to the Mars-Pluto opposition. It is powerful. It can make things happen. It is very determined. And so, Scorpio, if there is something you absolutely want with Mars opposition Pluto, I think there's a good chance that you can get it. But I suppose you have to think about, what is the right approach. And I don't think you have to always assume a conflict, especially now when we've got planets moving into Pisces. We've got Venus moving into Pisces. We've got Moon moving there as well. I mean, okay, the Moon might go into Pisces today. It might go into Pisces tomorrow. That kind of depends on where you are. But with Venus moving into Pisces, that does give you a certain amount of sensitivity, and you can understand people. And so, if there's something you really want, you don't necessarily have to use force. You can be subtle about it. You can take advantage of the fact that Venus is in Pisces. I mean, Pisces, water sign. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Pisces is a sign that has a natural sympathy with your own sign, and so that means that you can have a natural sympathy with other people. So, if you want someone to do something, you can probably use your emotions and use your sensitivity to get them to see things from your point of view, and it should all happen very easily, without much effort. And so, don't be in too much of a hurry. I mean, if you're in too much of a hurry and you want things done immediately, and you're not prepared to spend time to build up relationships, to explain your point of view, to get people to understand what you're saying, then that would be a waste. And at the same time, Scorpio, there is something about you that is exciting and dynamic, and I think that if you get the balance right and you're not too pushy, I think that people are going to find that interesting, and it's going to be more likely that they're going to listen to you. And in terms of relationships, I think it can be a very good day. I mean, firstly, Venus is moving into Pisces. I mean, Venus is ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign. So with Venus moving into Pisces, and there's a Moon conjunct Venus, from a relationship perspective, whatever the relationship is about, relationships can can really work. And maybe that should be your priority. You shouldn't be thinking about what you want. You should perhaps be thinking about the relationships around you and making sure that you're getting on with people, because perhaps once you get on with people, then you'll get what you want anyway, and so you can actually get what you want without perhaps having to try. And so a relaxed approach, Scorpio, I think is going to work very well. And I mean, if you're out and about and you're meeting people, then you can have some really interesting communications and interesting contacts, and perhaps even surprising contacts, and some kind of enhanced union may be possible. I mean, in other words, perhaps today you can come across someone who you apparently have very little in common with, but you talk to them and you make them feel comfortable, as I think you can do with Venus moving into Pisces, and then something happens. You may realize that you've actually got a lot in common. So Scorpio, it is a serious day. It has to be a serious day with Mars opposition Pluto, but don't take it too seriously, and also just consider your social skills and the fact that you can be incredibly sympathetic, and through your sympathy and understanding, you can get what you want without having to assume any kind of conflict. Sagittarius, it's a time when you may be feeling that you do want to maybe slow things down, and that is because we're starting to get a Pisces emphasis here. So Saturn and Neptune are already in Pisces, but the Moon and Venus are now moving into this sign, and so in terms of your chart, the chart is starting to get sort of weighed down. In other words, this sign Pisces, which is at the bottom of your chart, is emphasized, with 4 planets in Pisces. And so if you see Pisces as being about the home and the family and security, then you'll perhaps understand that you do need to slow things down, that you don't have to be getting attention all the time. There are times when, like now, when I think that you feel that you don't need to be the center of attention, that you can perhaps focus on things that are important to you, and giving yourself stability, and considering your home and your family. And yet Venus in Pisces, I mean, that's a very fortunate thing, Venus moving into Pisces. And Venus in Pisces is perhaps encouraging you to look around you, sort of consider what feels right, what looks good, and if you're surrounded by something that you find to be ugly or displeasing with Venus in Pisces, well, you can change it. And having harmony around you just impacts everything else. And so you're going to function best when there is an environment of harmony, when you're feeling settled and when you're feeling secure, and do think about what is needed, perhaps for the rest of the year. The year has now begun, and so what matters in 2025? Well, 2025, all sorts of stuff is going to be going on in 2025. So perhaps the first thing you want to do as you move into 2025 is to just ground yourself. Make sure that your private affairs, your private business is all in order, that you're feeling happy where you are, that the people around you are nurturing, that you've got your family close at hand if need be. I mean, of course it depends. People have different attitudes to their family, so it kind of depends on your situation. But you just want to make sure that everything is in order, and that you feel comfortable and secure. And then, as the year progresses, things won't stay in Pisces forever. I mean, Moon will move into Aries soon enough, over the next couple of days. But Moon is not going to stay in Pisces. Moon is a fast mover, and then Venus will move into Aries in a month's time. And that will be different. But for the moment, just think about what needs to be done, and just starting 2025 on a secure footing. And really, I don't want to say any more, because that is, I think, what you need to focus on. Capricorn, you are, I think, feeling quite comfortable in your environment. By environment, I suppose I'm talking about your locality, perhaps your community, and you're feeling that you do have connections, and that you can perhaps reach out to people that you haven't talked to for some time. I mean, I suppose it's a new year. It's a good time to make sure that you're on speaking terms with, I don't know, with your neighbours, people you see regularly but never talk to. Those kind of people. I think that you can do this, very effectively. Especially with Venus moving into Pisces, and so Venus moving into Pisces, it allows you to be sensitive to other people, particularly if you don't normally talk to them. You'll know what to say, and it's not that you have to say very much. It's just that you can make contact, and so don't feel that you have to be alone, that you are living on your own patch of dirt, or perhaps working in your own space, whatever it is, that you don't have to have any connection with whatever or whoever is bordering you. Your neighbours do matter, whether they're your literal neighbours or your metaphorical neighbours. Things that are close at hand, that you can perhaps often just pretend they don't exist, but they do exist. And the more connected you are, Capricorn, I think the better for yourself, and I think the better for everyone, the better for your community. Now, Venus moving into Pisces, I think, can also be quite useful in terms of the structure of your ambitions. I mean, because Venus is exalted in Pisces, and I mean, if you look at your chart, you can say, well, it's a chart for Capricorn, but the sign at the top of the chart, very much connected with your with work, career, your ambitions, your status, is Libra. And so the ruler of Libra is Venus. And so with Venus moving into Pisces, into the sign of its exaltation, I think in a general sense, you could say that is good for your work, for your ambitions, for getting what you want. And to be more specific, it's good for being able to talk about it, discuss things. So if there is a delicate matter that has not been discussed, perhaps because you're too shy, or you're afraid that there's going to be a negative response, now might be a good time to sort of bring it up, because you'll have the right level of sensitivity. I mean, you've got to be subtle about it. You don't want to just make demands just out of nowhere. You've got to sort of maneuver yourself into a position where you can tell people what you want. For example, authority figures, people you respect, people you're perhaps slightly afraid of, but you can bring up delicate issues in such a way that, I don't think will cause any offence, because I think you have the right level of sensitivity. Now, I'm not saying that there's a huge amount of a hurry to do this. Venus does stay in Pisces for some time. I mean, Venus moves out of Pisces on the 4th of February. So you've got a month to work it out. And so that might be perhaps your task for January, just to work out the best way of discussing things that are important to you, and just not being too reserved and not being too shy. So that, I think, makes for a time when you can be successful, and when you can sort of push forward, with your own interests. Of course, you've got the moon moving into Pisces. Okay, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. So it may just be over the weekend you have a chance to tell people what's on your mind and make gentle demands. Whatever those gentle demands are. I mean, it might not be to do with your ambitions or your career. If there's something you want to ask for, then I think there's a good chance of success over the next few days. And finally, I suppose I should mention the fact that there is this Mars opposition Pluto. I mean, I've already mentioned it before, but this Mars-Pluto opposition is exact, and I think it could be a little bit stressful. It does have a financial element for you, as I've already mentioned, because it's on the finance axis of your chart. So there might be concerns about money, feeling that money is owed to you, or feeling that for some reason money is a problem. Mars opposition Pluto, but it goes back to what I was saying about the Venus moving into Pisces, moon moving into Pisces. If there is something bothering you, something that you feel needs to be discussed, you need to tell people how you feel, and you've been holding back, but it's making you nervous. I think perhaps with the moon and Venus moving into Pisces, you actually have a chance to discuss these concerns, discuss these things that are really bothering you, and to discuss it in a way that is sensitive, that is not going to upset people, and it is perhaps a chance where you can resolve a difficult issue and create a feeling of harmony. Yeah, it is possible, and maybe over the next few days you will have a chance to resolve it. But if you feel that this weekend you can't get it together, I mean, don't worry. Venus is in Pisces until February the 4th, so you do have an opportunity to resolve it. I mean, one thing I should say is that Mars is next week on Monday. On Monday, Mars leaves Leo, and the Mars-Pluto opposition is not there anymore, really. But Mars does move back into Cancer, and of course Mars will be in your opposite sign, and that might have some impact on relationships, but I mean, don't worry about it. I'll discuss it at the beginning of next week. Aquarius, there is an opposition between Mars and Pluto, and this Mars-Pluto opposition is right across the main axis of your chart. You've got Pluto in Aquarius, Mars in Leo, your opposite sign. Yeah, and they are opposition to one another. And this aspect could potentially be quite powerful. I think that you might already feel it, and Mars is going retrograde, and it may say something about your connections with other people. It may say something about relationships, and with this Mars opposition Pluto, I do think that relationships do have to be treated carefully, because it might indicate a difference of opinion that has perhaps been brewing for some time, and it's also possible that someone is being stubborn, and that would be represented by Mars in Leo. Mars in Leo, Mars in your opposite sign, opposition Pluto. They're being stubborn, and getting people to change could be difficult. And once people have made up their mind, well, that might be it. You can try your hardest, you can try to reason with them, but are they going to listen? Not necessarily. And so if you are in that kind of situation, then you perhaps need to skirt around the areas of disagreement, or skirt around the things that other people are stubborn about. So if someone is very stubborn about something, well, perhaps you can think about something else, focus on something completely different, and that might be the best way of dealing with the situation. I think that at some level your social skills aren't too bad at the moment, and you're able to be friendly in a sort of a general sense, and I think that you're able to focus on common ground, what can bring you and other people together, and I think you can get noticed in that way. And so if you have the sensitivity to understand what people are upset about, what people are worried about, what people's priorities are, then I think you should be okay. So in general, Mars opposition Pluto could be a difficult influence, and you just have to accept that people are what they are, and some things they're not going to compromise on compromise over, and also consider your impact on others. I've said that you can be sociable, you can be friendly, but at the same time, Pluto is in your sign, and you may represent the future. I mean, you may not feel right now that you represent the future, but certain other people may perceive you as representing the future. And if they perceive you as representing the future, then they might perceive you as being a threat. I mean, that is logical, isn't it? So, what do you represent? What excites you about the future? And what do you say about the future? It may be nothing you say. It's just something about your personality and the way you're looking at 2025. And as you get more comfortable with Pluto being in Aquarius, Pluto is quite a transformative energy, and it's in your sign. You're perhaps one of the people that can create the kind of changes that people are worried about in 2025. And so, that might be why you get a negative reaction. And so, Aquarius, maybe you shouldn't be too Aquarian in terms of what you say. So perhaps don't talk about your plans for the future. Perhaps you shouldn't talk about your perspective on, the way the world is progressing, because you might just sound a little bit too confident. And if you're too confident, that might make people nervous. So that really is possible. So that's one thing going on. We also have quite a lot of activity in the sign Pisces. So Venus has been moving through your sign for some time, and now Venus is moving into Pisces. So what does that mean? I think that Pisces for you is a sign that is often connected with money and what you own. I mean, I'm always a bit wary of talking about money because some people are not interested in money, but money tends to be something of concern. And so with Venus moving into Pisces, I think that financially it could be a good thing. And Venus stays in Pisces until February the 4th. And so, Venus is exalted in Pisces. And so from a financial perspective, you're perhaps able to just intuitively or at least emotionally understand what's going on. So if anything has been sort of hidden from you financially, or something is obscured, I think with that Venus in Pisces, that gives you the ability to just understand what is happening. You first of all have a feeling, and then you sort of act on that feeling, and you try to get some confirmation for that feeling, and when you look for confirmation, you find it, and so perhaps you realize what's happening financially, and you see it, and because you realize what's happening, that actually puts you in a position to take action. And okay, it doesn't have to be super dramatic action, but it's action nonetheless, and it might be action but is informed by your own feelings and your own sensitivity. And also we've got the moon moving into Pisces, so over the weekend you've got moon Venus in Pisces, and so that does allow you to tune into your finances, and perhaps tune into what needs to be done, and perhaps tune into not just your own finances but other people's finances as well. So you might have some good advice to give people. I mean, I suppose if one wants to be really negative, I don't want to be overly negative, but I suppose you could say Pisces can be a little bit fluid, a little bit chaotic, and so maybe with moon Venus in Pisces there might be a temptation to, in the first instance, to be a little lax with your money, and to just let go of it unnecessarily and spend money on something you don't need to spend. But I think that's unnecessary. And of course, when the Venus moves into Pisces, it actually starts to make a conjunction to Saturn. Now, that conjunction between Venus and Saturn, you're not going to see it for a couple of weeks, but you will start to feel its influence pretty soon. And I think that Venus conjunct Saturn may actually be very useful financially. It may really allow you to get things together and to really sort yourself out. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Maybe we'll talk about it. Well, probably don't have to talk about it for a couple of weeks, but just be aware that Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Saturn. Pisces. Well, in a way, the Pisces season is really starting. I mean, I know that the sun doesn't move into Pisces for 6 weeks, not until towards the end of February, but still, the sign Pisces is starting to be emphasized. We've got the moon and Venus moving into Pisces, so certainly by tomorrow, by Saturday, you're going to have 4 planets in Pisces. You're going to have the moon in Pisces, you're going to have Venus in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces. So that kind of puts the focus on you, and it's a time when you seem to understand what's going on, when maybe you're starting to be the center of attention, because you get things, at least on an emotional level, and you know how things are working, and your feelings are unlikely to let you down. And with Venus moving into Pisces, from a social perspective, that is great, isn't it? Venus moving into Pisces, it says something about how you present yourself, and with Venus in Pisces, you present yourself as a pleasant, warm, sympathetic person. If you want to be, and you show an interest in other people, you can put people at their ease. So from a social perspective, really try to make the most of it, for whatever reason, whether you just want to get close to people for the sake of it, or whether you've got ambitions that require other people's cooperation, and now is the time to really get going on it. I suppose Venus in Pisces, I suppose if you have an interview or you're trying to impress someone, you should be able to do it. And Venus is in Pisces until the beginning of February, so you've got a month to really make the most of this. And so I think that is something you can really use. And in a couple of weeks' time, Venus will be making a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces, and I think that Venus conjunct Saturn should work in your favor, because I think you're very used to Saturn in your sign now. And Saturn is not going to stay in Pisces forever. Very soon, relatively soon, Saturn will go out of Pisces and sort of into Aries, and sort of 25, 26, you're going to have Saturn moving back and forth between the two signs. But with Venus moving towards a conjunction of Saturn, I think that allows you to, really get yourself together and to come over as a serious but sympathetic person. So there is this change, and I think that this change does very much work in your favor, and also at the moment you're able to set the pace. Perhaps recently you felt that you weren't able to set the pace, that perhaps you were holding something back, you perhaps didn't feel that you were entirely in your element, but now you are in your element. You can set the pace, and if there's anything you don't like, you want to change, then Pisces, I'm absolutely confident that you can do it. It's just not gonna be too difficult, and so perhaps it's a time when you can really trust your social skills, and that really should be the focus. Though the main aspect for many people today is the fact that Mars is opposition Pluto. Now, this Mars opposition Pluto, it doesn't affect you directly. I mean, Mars is not your ruler. It's not. This opposition is not on an important axis of your chart, but I suppose it could have some influence. I think that with this aspect, it may relate to some kind of obsession. I mean, it relates to an obsession of everyone because Pluto's involved. So I'm not singling you out, Pisces, but you perhaps may be very aware of the dichotomy between order and chaos. And chaos is a concept that Pisceans are quite familiar with. I mean, it is the chaos of the sea, it is the chaos of the ocean. And with Mars opposition Pluto, on one hand, you're trying to understand things, you're trying to order things, perhaps even categorize things at the moment. And perhaps that's where a lot of your energy has gone into. But at the same time, you're almost aware that you're trying to categorize something that is not possible to categorize because it's just too infinite. But you are trying to make sense of it. And I suppose Pluto may represent some of your fears, probably unreasonable fears. And so perhaps you're afraid of chaos. And you shouldn't be afraid of chaos because you're a Pisces, but for some reason you might be with this Mars opposition Pluto. So it's certainly a good idea to try to categorize things if you want to categorize things. If you want to put things in order, put things in boxes, you can try. But just don't think you're going to be 100% successful, because there are always going to be things that you really don't understand and you're never going to understand, at least on a logical level. But I'm not singling you out. We're all in that boat, I think. But so don't take something which is not personal, which is collective. Don't take it to heart. Some things just are chaotic, and that's just the way it is. And I think as a Pisces, ultimately, you should be able to recognize that more than anyone else. And now I want to look at Friday from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 34, which is the taming power of the great. And this is it is hexagram number 34. I just put the wrong number in. I put number 9 because yesterday we had the taming power of the small, but now it's the taming power of the great. So here's the hexagram, hexagram 34, the taming power of the great. And this is a hexagram which is saying something about us, and it's saying something about us and our strength and what we can do. And the hexagram is telling us that we are in ourselves something of a wild force. We do have a lot of power in ourselves, and the hexagram, the I Ching kind of relates this perhaps as to a ram or a sort of a goat, some sort of powerful animal that has perhaps been released and is charging around. That would be the first image. But then it is the taming power. So it's like we have a lot of power. So as the new year starts, as we move into 2025, we do feel that we have a lot of control, not just control. In fact, we don't have much control at all. We don't want to have control. We can make things happen, and we do feel that we are very dynamic. But there is a danger here that we're in a situation where our environment isn't supportive. We've got all these ideas, we've got all this energy, but can the environment deal with us? Is the situation able to give us what we want? And the answer might be no. So that's why we need to sort of tame ourselves, and we need to perhaps tame our ambitions, because we don't want to take things too far, and we do need to understand our limitations. And so we have got the second line from the bottom moving, and the second line from the bottom is actually quite good, and it's basically saying that we just need to continue, and it's saying that things are moving. Things are opening up for us. There are new possibilities. And so the gateway to 2025, the gateway to our future success, it's opening up. But we don't want to get too caught up in our enthusiasm. We could be over enthusiastic about it, saying, well, we're being released, like a wild animal that's got this chance to finally bolt. And we don't want to be like that, because actually when we bolt, when we actually go out there into the world and start rushing around trying to make things happen, things might not be so easy. So we do need a certain amount of discipline. We need to start to experience these opportunities, but we also need to be wary that there are limits to what we can achieve, and if we want to be successful, we're probably going to need a certain amount of support. So that's the first. Well, it's the second line moves, and then the sixth line move, the top line moves, and with the top line moving, there is some danger that we make some progress. We make quite a lot of progress, but in the end, we get stuck. And you have the image perhaps of a goat butting into a hedge and can't go forward. Maybe it can go backwards, but certainly can't go forward. It's as far as we can go. And so this line is not necessarily unfortunate, though, because the I Ching does say it is fortunate if we behave in the right way. And so it's understanding our limits and just retreating and just accepting that we can't go any further. So, that's the taming power of the great. We do have a lot of power, but can the world handle us? Can the world actually give us what we want? Just because we're powerful doesn't mean we can get what we want. And we just have to respect the limitations around us. Now, this hexagram does move, and it moves to hexagram number 30, which is the clinging. And the clinging, I suppose, is talking about we need to cling to what we have. And there is more imagery with animals here. So the previous hexagram 34, the taming power of the great, the image was of a goat or a ram just running around rampantly. With the clinging, the image is of the cow, and it's saying that we have to sort of look after the cow. The cow is docile, and so it's a much calmer, in one sense it's a much calmer hexagram, because perhaps we're trying to look after and nurture something in ourselves, something that is important to us, perhaps nurture our talents and our power, but just we're not quite ready to make the big move. And in terms of the actual symbolism, it is quite a fiery hexagram. It is a clinging. You've got the top trigram and the bottom trigram are the same, and each of those trigrams represents the sun. So it's even like the sun rising twice, and so we do have a lot of power. That we're feeling our own warmth and our own brightness, but it's not the kind of fire. It's not thunder fire, because there are hexagrams in the I Ching which relate to fire in different ways, but this is not about thunder. It's about just the fire that's burning. And I suppose I'm thinking that maybe this is the fire of the hearth. I suppose if you're into sort of asteroids and astrology, I suppose Vesta is connected with the hearth, and we need to focus on our own energy, on nurturing our own energy. And that compares with the previous hexagram where we were kind of blasting out and maybe not achieving very much, and just retreating and reminding ourselves of our power, nurturing that power, keeping that fire going. And then perhaps tomorrow or next week, we can have another go. Perhaps we'll be in a better condition, we'll be in a better state. And I suppose, there's a reminder with the taming power of the great moving to the clinging. We've got Mars opposition Pluto today. And so Mars opposition Pluto today, we might take things too seriously. We might be too obsessed with making things happen. And maybe this is a reminder that what we need to do is calm down and perhaps remind ourselves that Venus is moving into Pisces. And so, we can nurture ourselves, nurture our energy, and then have another look at the situation a bit later, whether that's tomorrow or next week. It depends. So now I do want to look at Mars opposition Pluto. So we have this Mars-Pluto opposition aspect, which I have been talking about for some time. And so let me just show you the Mars-Pluto opposition. So here's a chart for here is Mars opposition Pluto. This is the precise moment of that opposition, and so you can see that Mars is at 1 degree 8 Leo, and Pluto is 1 degree 8 Aquarius. And I think we're already starting to feel that Mars-Pluto opposition in terms of behavior. I mean, there have been shootings over the last few days. We've had the shooting in New Orleans. There was a shooting in Montenegro. I think there was a shooting in New York. And there is a certain atmosphere of tension, and perhaps this is a feeling that people have to assert themselves now, and it is Mars retrograde, so there's maybe a certain weakness to that Mars opposition Pluto. Mars retrograde, we can't assert ourselves in the normal way. I mean, remember, if you're taking action, if you want to attack something, maybe you want to initiate a lawsuit or you want to start a war, whatever, you should really do it when Mars is direct. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Doing it when Mars is retrograde, there is a certain weakness to it, a certain hopelessness to it with Mars opposition Pluto. And, thinking about the New Orleans attack, something interesting about the New Orleans attack is that I try to be very sort of logical in my astrology, and as far as I'm concerned, I like to see time moving in one direction. I know time moves in two directions because when you look at converse and direct solar returns, I mean, I concede that if you want to know what's happening on someone's 60th year, you can look at their solar return for their 60th birthday, but you can also look at their solar return for 60 years before they were born. So if someone was born in 2000, for example, let's take a better example. If someone was born in 1960 and you wanted to know what was going to know about their 60th birthday, you would do their solar return for 2020, but you could also do their solar return for 1900, which was 60 years before they were born. And if we relocate this Mars-Pluto opposition to New Orleans, it's kind of interesting that Mars opposition Pluto set for New Orleans, the midheaven was at 1°7 Leo, and Mars was at 1°8 Leo, and Pluto was at 1 degree. Obviously, it was at 1°8 Aquarius. So the Mars-Pluto opposition was exactly on the MC-IC line for that Mars, at the precise moment of that Mars-Pluto opposition. So the question is, was that Mars-Pluto opposition saying anything about the shooting? Was it even foreshadowing the shooting, even though that Mars-Pluto opposition happened over 2 days after the shooting? That is that question about, can you predict a previous event in terms of a future event? I mean, people often look at new moons and full moons, and the new moon and the full moon can say something about what happened before the new or the full moon. At least that is a view of astrology. I mean, I will be coming back to the New Orleans shooting, but I just wanted to mention what I noticed there. So, in terms of people's horoscopes, if someone has Mars opposition Pluto, it is about power. I mean, Mars is the planet of power. It's an energetic influence, and it wants to assert itself. And Pluto is about transformation, and because it's an opposition, it is a struggle to create some kind of transformation, and also a perception that there might be a power struggle, that it might be you against them, having to battle, having a battle with the world. And so I thought I'd just look at a couple of people who had Mars opposition Pluto. I don't know a great deal about him, but the governor of Pennsylvania, for example, Josh Shapiro, who Kamala Harris rather unwisely passed over in terms of her vice presidential pick. Maybe if she'd picked Josh Shapiro, she would have won Pennsylvania. Who knows? Maybe she would have won the whole thing, but I doubt it. But Josh Shapiro has Mars at 29 Pisces, and he has his Pluto at 1 degree Libra. So this is an example of someone who is who's very focused on control, making things happen. And so in terms of a presidency, you might imagine that someone who had Mars opposition Pluto, he could be very ambitious, and he is thinking about 2028 or beyond. I don't think, I haven't done any astrology for it, but my current feeling is, having looked at things in a very general way, I'm absolutely not making a prediction here, but from what I can see at the moment, I don't think the Democrats are going to win in 2028. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm basing that on a Jupiter-Saturn cycle. I think that things will still be looking pretty good for the Republicans in 2028. 2032, that is a different matter, completely different matter, because we've got the Jupiter-Saturn opposition in 2029. So Josh Shapiro puts a high premium on power, and I'm sure that he's thinking it all through. And look at his Sun in Gemini, square Mars, square Pluto, and with that Mars opposition Pluto, he may be sensitive to what's happening with the Mars-Pluto opposition that we have. And there is one more Mars-Pluto opposition as well, sort of in the spring, I think. So that may be a time where he's starting to position himself for 2028. I think Gavin Newsom has a Mars-Pluto square in his chart, I think. I'm pretty sure he does. So that is Josh Shapiro, 29. He's got his Mars at 29 Pisces. Someone else who we know very well who has Mars opposition Pluto is, of course, Justin Trudeau. I'm not going to spend any time on his chart just because we talked about him so much. But Justin Trudeau, there's his Mars 29 Pisces, like Josh Shapiro, and he's got his Mars opposition Pluto. So, in fact, he's kind of got the Sun making a T-square, like Josh Shapiro. He has got Sun aspecting his he's got a Sun Mars Pluto T-square. So don't worry if you're concerned that Justin Trudeau is fading into the distance. You've got Josh Shapiro to worry about soon enough, maybe 2032, I would have said. I'm not saying he's going to be the candidate in 2032. I would have thought 2032 is the earliest time that a Democrat can expect to win. And also with Justin Trudeau, we know that Justin Trudeau is going to have Neptune on his Mars. Josh Shapiro will also have Neptune on his Mars. Other politicians, in a sort of French context, the former Prime Minister of France and sort of Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier has an exact Mars-Pluto opposition. So he knows about power. He wants power. I think he really wanted to be president of France, but he didn't make it as prime minister, and he didn't last very long as prime minister. So I'm assuming that his presidential ambitions have gone out of the window. But certainly Mars-Pluto, in his time, he was powerful, and he was a powerful negotiator, and he was a very effective negotiator during the Brexit negotiations with the UK. And another French politician who has sort of fallen out of the news recently, but I don't think she's gone away, is Lucie Castex. Now, Lucie Castex, I don't know much about her, but she is a member of a French parliament, and she was the left coalition were putting her forward as a prime minister. They wanted her to be prime minister around the time of the Olympics, and Mitterrand said no. And I mean, she seems to be a very establishment figure, Lucie Castex. She went to all the good schools. She's a bureaucrat. I think she speaks Chinese, and she's a very good tennis player. And she's got Mars opposition Pluto. So, and she's young. So with this Mars opposition Pluto in the sky, I think that maybe Lucie Castex might reappear. Although I'm just using this chart to illustrate, give an example of someone who is who's kind of in the public eye at the moment, and who's probably very motivated. And I know that Mars is a male planet, and you might think, well, she might project her Mars. Of course, I believe she's in a same-sex relationship. I don't know if that's got anything to do with her Mars opposition Pluto. But that's Lucie Castex, and so she's not going away. I'm sure we'll hear about Lucie Castex again pretty soon. So Russell Brand has Mars opposition Pluto. We haven't heard from him. Well, I mean, I know he has a very popular YouTube channel, but Russell Brand has Mars opposition Pluto. He is someone who very much likes to project himself and his power. He comes over, I suppose, as a powerful, charismatic person who's very into his image. And Mars in Aries. He's got Moon in Aries. He's got Jupiter in Aries. Yeah, he's got that Mars opposition Pluto. And he is someone who is always in conflict. Mars opposition Pluto can be about power struggles, and he is in endless power struggles as far as I can see. His channel has been threatened. There was stuff going on about how he supposedly treated certain women, and that was why his monetization on his YouTube channel got cancelled, and so it's all a bit of a struggle for him. And in terms of his view of the world, he is someone who has kind of on some kind of political journey, and he does very much put forward. It's very difficult to describe it, but he's someone from the left who has kind of gone on a journey, and who perhaps sees the way the world is being undermined by globalism and things like the World Economic Forum, and was concerned about vaccines and so forth. Again, that is seeing a conflict, seeing that one is always involved in a power struggle, and so maybe he's sort of channeling his Mars-Pluto opposition. So that's Russell Brand. And I suppose if you've got Mars opposition Pluto, that can encourage you to violent behavior. I mean, it can. And Ryan Ruth. I don't know. He's still facing trial, so I suppose we could say we don't really know whether he's guilty or not. But he's accused of making an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and I think he was a Democrat supporter and is a Democrat supporter, and he has got Mars opposition Pluto. So there is his Mars, there is his Pluto. Mars opposition Pluto. So he may feel there is no alternative. He had to do what he had to do. He had to attack Trump. There was no choice. And finally, I'm not going to say much about her, but we've got Tulsi Gabbard, Mars opposition Pluto. So she clearly is a powerful woman who is able to assert her power. The first time she really asserted her power was when she destroyed Kamala Harris in the was it the 2020 Democrat primaries, where she tore Kamala Harris to bits very succinctly. And so she is a powerful woman. Sun conjunct Mars, opposition Pluto. She clearly believes in herself, and Mars opposition Pluto is about transformation, and so I suppose she perhaps transforms her target. She starts as a Democrat and ends, and well, at least maybe the Republican Party isn't her final journey, but she's now fallen behind. She's now obviously a supporter of Trump, and I think she's got a role lined up for herself, I think to do with intelligence. But anyway, that's Mars opposition Pluto, and she may be an example of someone who's able to effectively use Mars-Pluto opposition. I now wanted to consider people impacted by Mars opposition Pluto, people who right now might be impacted by this opposition. So one person we already know has been impacted by the Mars opposition Pluto is Shamsuddin Bahar Jabbar, who is the person who, I think he's dead now, but who I think was responsible for what happened in New Orleans. And so he was born on October the 26th, 1982. And that means that he has his sun at 2 degrees Scorpio. So with his sun at 2 degrees Scorpio, when all that shooting happened in New Orleans, if you compare the two charts, Mars was at 147 Leo. So Mars was reasonably close to the square to his sun. So over the last few weeks, Mars had gone retrograde, gone back over his sun. So Mars would have hit his sun at the beginning of November. Then it would have gone retrograde, and it was about to sort of, and then it went back over his sun. So that was the sort of a build-up to what he did. And it may be relevant also that Pluto is at 105. So that Mars-Pluto opposition was affecting his sun. I mean, not exactly, but it was a couple of degrees off. So he might be an example of someone who's already been impacted by the Mars-Pluto opposition. And I just talked about Lucy Castet's, and Lucy Castet's, she has a Mars-Pluto opposition in her chart. She also has she also has an exact Moon-Venus square. So that Moon-Venus square may be impacted by this Mars-Pluto opposition. So if she's got Mars opposition her Venus, Mars square her Sun, Mars square her Moon. I don't know whether that will say anything about what she does in terms of politics, but she is going to be sensitive to this Mars-Pluto opposition. So I think you'd have to be French to make sense of it, but it may say something about her personal life, I suppose. But again, what I was saying about Lucy Castet's perhaps being someone to watch at the moment, not just now. I mean, Mars is not exactly on her Moon, but over the next few days, Mars will be square her Moon, square her Venus. Sorry, Mars will be opposition her Venus, square her Moon. Probably we won't see anything. It's perhaps more about her personal life. And another person we might not know anything, find out anything about it, is Monica Lewinsky. She came up because Monica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky, just a reminder, she was an intern in the White House in the 90s who had an encounter with Bill Clinton, which had a sort of a dramatic impact on her life. I think she was kind of treated unfairly. I think that she got all the sort of the publicity. Clinton was able to sort of get through it all, but Clinton obviously should have known better. But Monica Lewinsky has her sun at 0 degrees 46 Leo, and so she's going to have the Mars-Pluto opposition is going to be right on her sun. Again, we might not see any impact in terms of her public life, but I suppose you could say in January there's a lot of emphasis on the presidency, and because we've got the inauguration coming up, so maybe she'll be interviewed, and I don't know, maybe she'll be sort of forced into the limelight if that's what she doesn't want. I don't know, but so that Mars-Pluto opposition could have an impact on Monica Lewinsky, even if we don't actually see anything. I mean, it may just relate to her private life. And then we've got El Salvador. So El Salvador, the president of El Salvador is Nayib Bukele. So Nayib Bukele has got his sun. He's got a Sun North Node conjunction at 1 degree Leo. So Nayib Bukele, well, he's famous for dramatically reducing crime in El Salvador. The story goes that a few years ago, El Salvador had the worst crime rate in the Americas. It now has the second best crime rate after Canada. Apart from Canada, it is the most crime-free country in America. So at least that's what we're told. And he's done that by throwing all the gangs into prison, and he's been completely brutal about it. Also, he has made Bitcoin El Salvador's official currency, along with the dollar. El Salvador does not have its own currency. And there have been arguments that he's been having with the IMF. The IMF obviously doesn't like what he's doing, although it's, the country has been collecting Bitcoin, and I think it's been said that it could now pay off its national debt with its Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's gone up so much. I don't know what it's done today, but because I'm recording this on the 2nd, on a Friday, on a Thursday, but so he's putting himself perhaps in a difficult position. I mean, there are a lot of people internally and externally who probably want to get Nayib Bukele. I mean, he must have enemies in his own country, having put so many people in prison, plus the international system and the IMF and the globalists and the international bankers probably are not too supportive of Nayib Bukele and would love him to fail. So with that Mars opposition Pluto, he may be under a certain amount of pressure, or with that Mars opposition Pluto, he may feel he has to do something dramatically to assert his authority. And one other person, we absolutely must consider is Zelensky. So here is Vladimir Zelensky's chart. Zelensky has his Mars at 0 degrees 15 Leo. So Mars is going to be retrograde. He's about to have a Mars return over the next couple of days. Mars will be going back onto his Mars at the same time as Pluto is opposition his Mars. I don't know. Zelensky seems to be able to survive everything, but it's perhaps another time where he's going to be under a lot of pressure. And remember, Zelensky's enemies, in terms of anyone wanting to kill him, are not the Russians. I don't think the Russians have any desire to kill Zelensky. I think it would, if anyone wants to blow up Zelensky, it would be probably people at home who would, probably the plan might be to blow up Zelensky, kill Zelensky, and find some way of blaming it on the Russians. I mean, that would be the best way for many Ukrainians, for many top Ukrainians to deal with the Zelensky issue. I mean, he's not a man who is popular in his country, and I think a lot of people in Ukraine would like to get rid of him. So if you assassinate him and blame it on the Russians, you could say you're killing two birds with one stone. But so he's got Mars-Pluto issues. Now, I put up Biden's chart for two reasons. So with Biden, in terms of Biden's chart, Joe Biden has his moon at 0 degrees 59 Taurus. So Mars is going to be square his moon, and Pluto is square his moon. So his moon is being hit. Now, this might just be the fact that he's about to lose office, that he's about to, he's about to, I mean, not lose office. He lost office arguably quite a long time ago, but he's only got a couple of weeks left as president. Donald Trump is going to take over, and Mars and Pluto are hitting his moon, and that just may be all that it's about. But in terms of his inauguration, in fact, all inaugurations, Mars and Pluto is having an influence, and so the inauguration chart, not Donald Trump's inauguration chart, Joe Biden's inauguration chart had the Sun at 0 degrees 52 Aquarius. But the thing is, every inauguration chart since the 30s, I think the first inauguration chart when the president was inaugurated on January the 20th, I think it started, was it in 1940 or 1936, one of the two. Every inauguration of an American president in modern history has the Sun at 0 degrees Aquarius. So this always happens. And so the Mars-Pluto opposition is on the inauguration Sun. And so, again, that might just be saying that this inauguration is coming to an end. The Biden presidency that started with the sun at 0 degrees Aquarius, as every presidency starts with 0 degrees Aquarius. Mars opposition Pluto means it is coming to an end. But this time round, with this Mars-Pluto opposition right on the Biden inauguration sun, it does seem that it's not a comfortable transition. And it just is a reminder that Biden and those supporting him are going to be clinging on to power with everything they've got. I mean, of course, they know that Trump has to take over on January the 20th, but I mean, it just reminds us of how much we're going to do things to thwart the Trump presidency in the last few weeks. I think that's how I would interpret it. I mean, we already know they're trying to send as much money as possible to Ukraine. I mean, I think they're doing other things on a sort of at a domestic level to really try to hold up Trump's regime, and I think Trump's incoming regime. So that might be how the Mars-Pluto opposition on the inauguration sun is working. One other thing about inaugurations, and perhaps why Monica Lewinsky got so caught up with the White House, is that one other point about Monica Lewinsky's chart that's interesting is that she has her sun at... Monica Lewinsky's sun is at 0 degrees 46 Leo. So presidents always get inaugurated with the sun at 0 degrees Aquarius. So with her sun at sun degrees, with the inauguration, with Clinton's inauguration sun, as every modern president will have their inauguration sun at 0 degrees Aquarius, it's kind of opposition her sun, it's challenging her sun, it's undermining her sun. And so perhaps with her sun at 0 degrees Leo, she should never have got anything. She should have known that working in the White House, working with presidents, was a bad idea. And the final chart I want to look at is the chart of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December the 21st, 2020. And I look at this chart a lot. I think it's a really important chart, and because it represents the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, the whole cycle, which runs through the following 20 years. And this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was at 0 degrees 29 Aquarius. In other words, we've just had Pluto conjunct the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but now we've got Mars at, 1 degree 8. So Mars is exactly opposition the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And so I think that this Mars-Pluto opposition is really bringing out the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. That thing that started in December is now really coming into the open, and we're starting to see what this really means. And so I think the next few weeks, maybe even the next few days, could in its own way be quite dramatic in terms of telling us which way things are going. Now, this chart for the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is set for London, and so maybe this says something also about London, because at London, Westminster, the ascendant at the time of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December the 21st, 2020 at 6:20 p.m. was at 0 degrees 40 Leo. So Mars is on the ascendant of that. This is set for London. Pluto is on the descendant, and it's just a reminder that it's just more problems for the UK, this Mars-Pluto opposition. I think it's not going to be fun for the UK, and things, as I've said, things are going from bad to worse. I mean, the situation in the UK is bad, and I think that the astrology is really, really confirming this. Everything is confirming this, and as I've already discussed, you've got Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries on the descendant of the chart for when Starmer became Prime Minister. So that isn't looking particularly good. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Mars opposition Pluto, and I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.